Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this live edition of the Capitals Report on Facebook Live. We are fueled by a whole lot of coffee on this day. John Walton and Mike Vogel coming back from Toronto last night. The Caps with just a couple of guys out on the ice today. Barry Trotz talking a few moments ago, and all getting ready for Game 5 tomorrow night. Taking your questions as well. Tell us what's on your mind. Ask us what you want to, and we'll get to that here in the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. Let's talk Game 4, and let's talk about what was the best start for this team this series, the longest consecutive run probably of good hockey that we've seen, nearly 40 minutes. It had to withstand a furious rush that was fueled by some bad bounces, a couple of penalties, and then Toronto doing what they've done. This is a very good hockey team in the Maple Leafs, but the Caps found a way. Now they have home ice. They've got 2 of 3 at home if they need it, if it goes the distance. And as the pressure was probably on Washington in Game 3, now it's kind of swinging back the other way toward the Maple Leafs as we head into Game 5.
There's a lot to like, obviously, from Game 4. First of all, you end a 4-game road losing streak in the playoffs that if you hadn't, you'd have been in a two-game ditch in the series, and you would have matched the longest road losing streak playoff franchise history. I liked so much about last night's game, and afterwards Barry Trotz mentioned that he feels like after last night's game his guys now know how they have to play to have success against this team. Both teams I thought were really resilient last night too. This has been, for my money, and I have not seen obviously every minute of the other series as I have this one. I can't imagine any of the other 7 series are more entertaining and more thrilling and heart-stopping than this one's been. But last night, in a game like that, where a game of that magnitude, where if you lose, you're down 2 in the series, you need your best players to step up. And that's what the Caps had last night. Washington's top line set the tone immediately, scored early. Alex Ovechkin with a big power play goal, the only power play the Caps would get all night. And I thought Nicholas Backstrom absolutely had a vintage Backstrom game, had 2 assists, should have arguably, didn't get an assist on the power play goal. Without him, it doesn't happen. He makes 2 great plays to keep Toronto from clearing the zone. And ultimately what winds up happening is Ovechkin gets isolated on the weak side. Shattenkirk finds him. Tom Wilson going to the net at both ends of the ice, will over skill.
Very much so.
On that shift, that we're going to be talking about that shift for a long time, and the shift a couple minutes later where he lays out a guy and then goes in and scores on a 2-on-1 too. So you had a lot of guys playing big boy hockey last night when they had to, and liked the Caps' top defensive pair of Niskanen and Orlov. The third line took on a new look with Tom Wilson. I thought that was an inspired lineup tweak. Got to keep it rolling, but again, I take some heart from Barry saying that he thinks his guys now understand how they have to play to have success, and hopefully they'll be able to replicate that Friday and Sunday and beyond if necessary.
Questions about goalie interference. This ought to be fun. Chris asking, Mike John, you're now in charge of the rules. How do you fix this? Neither play in the end affected the final outcome, but it surely could have, and it may rise again this postseason. We saw 2 goal reviews last night. Neither went the Caps' way. The one that Braden wasn't very happy with at the end of the 3rd period, I thought was a little bit more shaded gray, but I thought Nate Schmidt, I think everyone did from the Caps standpoint. Freddie Anderson looked like, he's just trying to bring Nicky in a little bit closer for a word there with the big glove hand coming in, and Nicky trying to get out of the way. Nate Schmidt probably should have had the goal. We said it last night. Barry said it after the game. Barry said it again today. There's a standard that's very tough to find, and I get from an NHL standpoint trying to find something that you're somewhat judging subjectively is not easy, but having said that, I think there has to be a little bit more of a clarification here.
I don't think there's a lot of consistency in this rule in what constitutes goaltender interference. There's so much with this. Number one, in the old days, before they had this video review, the phrase goaltender interference was used to denote a penalty for interfering with the goaltender. That never happens anymore.
No penalties there.
So I don't understand. We say, oh, this goal's called off for goaltender interference. Well, okay, then why isn't that guy sitting in the box for 2 minutes? So there's been a whole erasure of a certain standard that existed before this video challenge came in. So there's that to start with. But I feel like you can see similar little nudges that one group of officials will say, okay, that's goaltender interference, no goal. And the next night, an incredibly similar play in a different building with two different sets of eyes looking at it will say, no, that's a good goal. And that makes it hard when you've got that one challenge. Now you're in the playoffs, and do I burn this? Maybe I need a timeout later if my guys get a couple of icings or something. I mean, this is really hard, I think, for coaches now to say. And I thought last night was absolutely a great challenge at that point of the game. You're in the third period. You've got a 2-goal lead. There's a whole lot of value. I think even if it wasn't obvious, you do it. At that point, that goal is the potential of that goal is way more valuable than a possible timeout with a 2-goal lead. The possibility of being up 3 has more value to you than maybe a timeout if your guys need it later on. So I thought it was a great challenge. I thought it was going to go the Caps' way, but you just never know. And again, one of the biggest problems here is you've got guys correcting their own work on something like this. When you got, we were in Toronto last night. That's where the war room is. We've been upstairs.
We've been there.
These giant TVs in there, and they don't use them for I guess just guys watching. But I mean, to me, let's get the best looks, and let's let some impartial. Mitch Korn put it best to me last night. We don't let students correct their own papers and exams, do we?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. To be fair, if you do need a timeout at some point, you can just pull James Van Riemsdyk off, and you can stall out for 45 seconds. That works too. If you want an extra timeout, you can do it that way.
I got an itch. I got to reach down.
I got to. Oh man, we better go look at that. Anyway, we digress. Andrew from Boston. The past 2 games, Washington has come out hot with some first period goals, but the Maple Leafs keep crawling back to make things interesting in the third. What needs to be done to play a full 60 minutes of Capitals hockey against this young Leafs team? I think the bounces have had a break or two here or there. Toronto has been very good in this series and take nothing away from them. But they have had some serious bounces in this series off of linesmen to turn into scoring chances, as we saw last night. There have been others. And it's tough, as Barry had noted too, about his goaltender. Braden's given up 4 goals in each of the last 3 games, but a goalie, it's all geometry. And if you start and get moving, that's when things start to get dicey, and that's been part of the issue in this series.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't fault Braden, and I don't fault the Caps. Number one, the Leafs are resilient. I think both teams in this series are resilient. I'm not worried. Doesn't sound like the Caps are too worried about Holtby's performance. I think 14 goals in 4 games, but try to remember if he's been beaten clean on any of those, like say for instance the Caps have done to Anderson. I feel like the Caps are getting he's got to be doubting his game a lot more than Braden is doubting his. They both given up 14 goals in 4 games. To me, Braden needs to just keep doing what he's been doing, not get away from. He can't let his confidence waver because he's giving up goals that aren't related to his play back there. They're more circumstantial than anything else. As far as playing 60 minutes of Caps hockey, you got 2 teams out there that both want to play 60 minutes of their brand of hockey, and Toronto's brand and Washington's brand are very, very different. And what we saw, I think, in the first 3 games, for a good bit of the first 3 games, was that Toronto was able to get the Caps to play their game, the Maple Leafs game, more than the other way around. And I think finally last night, the balance shifted to Washington's favor, and that's what's got to happen. You're rarely, if ever, going to get 60 minutes of your brand of hockey out there. It's not going to happen in the playoffs, I don't think. So you want to have more of those 60 minutes than the other team. That's the idea. I think that's a misnomer, that whole 60-minute thing. You can try to play your way. amount of time, but you've got another team that's got maybe the best coach in the game and a lot of really good players. There are going to be times when you're going to have to weather the storm a little bit, and it goes both ways too.
Question from Alexandra about the third line. It's got to stay the same for next game, right? Yes, no question. Tom Wilson moving up on that line, great chemistry with Burakovsky, and kind of felt like that third line, that's what you need, right? If you see Pittsburgh in the next round, or what this team was originally built for last summer was to be able to have a third line that was productive. Tom Wilson having one heck of a postseason so far.
And if you looked at going through 3 games of the playoffs around the league, I think James Myrtle had it up the list of the top 10 forward lines in terms of puck possession. Now, the number 1 line was the Austin Matthews line with some ridiculous number up in the 60s. But the only Caps line in the top 10 would probably surprise you. It was the Burakovsky, Eller, Connolly unit through 3 games. They were 9th among the top 10 lines. No production though. They were getting offensive zone time, but not getting the goals, not getting the payoff. And I think what they saw was that Lars Eller was having a really good series there for 3 games. That guy's a beast, and he's, for my money, the kind of guy you want on your team in the playoffs. I think he's been playing really well. But they didn't really have guys going to the net, and you saw last night with Tom Wilson on that line, they did have that, and he added that element and scored a goal that way. The first of his 2 goals comes just from going to the net, and just a random shot. That was maybe the most Maple Leafs goal the Caps have scored in the series. Just Eller spinning and firing in the general direction of the net, and Wilson gets a stick on it and it goes through Anderson. Big goal, obviously, the 2-goal swing there after Tom makes a great defensive play seconds earlier to save a goal. So I think that that's an inspired lineup tweak that the Caps made there. And you also get guys playing on their right sides and no longer playing on their off wing. You had Burakovsky playing on his off wing. You had Connolly playing on his off wing. Now you got guys in their proper positions, which makes it a little bit easier to get pucks out of your own end of the ice too, which again was one of the things that I thought really fueled the Caps last night. Their breakouts in the first 3 games were problematic. Toronto's forecheck was problematic. Last night, not so much.
Matt Fisher, can we get your take on Toronto delaying whenever there is an icing? Sure. Got to give them a delay game penalty at some point.
Yes.
Like, it can't take longer than a timeout would be. And Mike Babcock in the second period last night pulls James Van Riemsdyk to the bench. They end up getting the lineup sheet. It was this long, protracted saga. And guess what? After an icing call, they end up being rested. There's got to be some kind of warning there.
Yeah, same thing happened in game 2 in overtime.
Yeah.
Not too long before they scored the game-winning goal. Again, this is a case where you've got a guy who's been a sort of super coach in the league for better part of 20 years now, and he has that cachet with the Zebras apparently, where he gets away with a little more than. Pick your.
Jared Bednar's not going to get that.
Glenn Gullickson's not getting that call either. So, it shouldn't happen. It should not happen. It's kind of embarrassing to me, to the league, as a league, that you let this kind of stuff happen. That you're making the playing field that unlevel, if you will. It shouldn't happen, but here we are.
Let's see, Garrett next on the list. In my opinion, Game 5 going to be the decision maker in the series. Whoever wins Game 5 will probably go on to win the series. Would you agree? Mathematics over the course of the Stanley Cup playoffs would say, yeah, a good chance for Game 5. Not a lock, but certainly a big help. Also seem to be taking too many penalties. How do you prevent them? Is that leading them to losing their leads?
I mean, you look at the penalties themselves. I think Backstrom had the holding the stick call. That's when you're up 3 there. You don't want to take that penalty at that point of the game. They score on the power play. It's 4-2. The 2 penalties that really put the Caps in a dicey position was were the two in the waning seconds of the second period, the Lars Eller face-off violation and the Orpik slash. I mean, I guess that's just Washington Capitals playoffs to me. That's Joe Ward's double minor for high sticking. That's just, you know, this is not the time for this, but here we go, sort of a thing. And you definitely worry. The Leafs get a 5-on-3 for basically 2 full minutes on a fresh sheet of ice with 18 minutes to talk it over. Luckily, those were probably the best 2 minutes we've seen for Braden Holtby the whole series. He was terrific. But, I mean, yeah, you don't want to... Some penalties are good penalties to take. I don't know that any of those last night were. Certainly, Kevin Shattenkirk sailing one over the glass in Game 3 wasn't. Jay Beagle's interference call there in Game 3 wasn't. You don't want those penalties that sort of prevent you from having that 5-on-5 flow that this team, when it's rolling, and it was last night. You don't want to take them out of that. And I think that's what happened at the end of the second more than anything. Who knows how that game ends? I told you I thought that was a 6-2 hockey game that ended with a 5-4 final score. I think the Caps played way better than a 5-4 final would indicate. But we'll never know how that game would have turned out without those two penalties there.
Question that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds as we head in toward Game 5. Kevin asking any word on Karl Alzner's status. Barry Trotz was very brief in his comments about Karl today. He just met the media here a short time ago and said he's day-to-day, and he offered nothing else. In fact, when asked the follow-up about Nate Schmidt and comfort level and where he's been, didn't even have a whole lot to say about Nate as much as it was just not really tipping hand about what to expect. But Nate should have had a goal last night, and I think Nate, +4 in 2 games, he's been very good.
I mean, look at the first goal in each of the last 2 games. It's been the combination of Backstrom, Oshie, and Schmidt that have combined to score the game's first goal within 3-4 minutes of opening puck drop in each of the last 2 games. They've definitely gotten a lift from Schmidt being in the lineup, but you can't. I mean, the question of what happens if Alzner's healthy, then what? You can't deal. An NHL coach can't be dealing in hypothetical questions like that. Where we've seen, look at the Boston Bruins. How many defensemen have they lost in the last 2-3 weeks? You get a guy back, sure, but what happens in the meantime? Maybe
somebody else goes out.
Guy. So it's pointless to answer a hypothetical question about personnel. I get not. Basically, bottom line, Karl Alzner is day to day, and when he's ready to play, and then they'll look at it and say, okay, who do we have who's available and healthy to play, and what lineup is going to give us the best chance to win this hockey game tonight? And day to day is day to day. We knew he wasn't going to play yesterday. I don't know that he's been ruled out for Game 5 or 6. I guess we'll find out tomorrow morning. It's an upper body injury. He skated today. That's a good thing. His legs, as we saw when Andre Burakovsky came back, his legs were fine. He had a lot of jumps. So we'll see. We'll see when he gets back. But ideally, no injuries between now and then, and you have a hard decision to make. I think that's what you want.
Betsy asking who will be the Game 5 hero. We were pretty good on this. You know what? You had said Eller and I had said Wilson, and I was thinking Eller had a chance in that very next game after Wilson won it in Game 2. We both could have been right the last time we did this.
Carlson shot. Yeah.
I think I'm kind of on the vibe you're laying down here. Lars Eller, a guy who is on that line very close. I think you could put Andre Burakovsky. I think the third line is started to have an awakening here, which I think could be trouble for Toronto. We saw it last night. It wasn't just Tom Wilson. But Betsy, if you're looking at where we're at as far as people who are the stocks going up, we thought Wilson. You said Eller. I think Eller this time around. I think that's a good call.
I love Nick Backstrom's game when the chips are down. I thought last night was a vintage Nicholas Backstrom game. I go back to Game 4 of the Islanders series 2 years ago. Same situation. You're on the road. You're down 2-1. That game goes into overtime. Nick Backstrom scores the game winner. Go back to 2012. Caps lose game 1. Game 2 goes into overtime. Nick Backstrom supplies the overtime winner. I think this guy has come up large for this team many times over the years when he needed to. And I think I saw last night where he now has 17 points in his last 17 playoff games, which is not easy to do at this time of year.
Last one, and this is kind of a fun one, I guess. Katia, I think, maybe. Can you confirm Toronto refs are on the Canadian mob bankroll? Kelly Sutherland lives here in Northern Virginia and is a BC native, so I don't think you have to worry about that. Chris Lee doing the game last night, they were fine.
Yeah.
I think the thing was that, and this speaks to a bigger thing, and you brought this up before. You have a situation where you are looking at a goal that would cinch the game essentially for Washington if Nate Schmidt's goal counts, and you're trying to figure out goaltender interference. I think it's a tough thing to reverse when you got 18,000 crazies and another, 9,000 or whatever it is in Maple Leaf Square and everybody jumping up and down. There has to be some human element when you're sitting there. It's like, this is really close.
Yeah.
This is really close. What do we do here with this? To me, and I think to everyone in the Washington camp, we said it live last night. Barry Trotz said it. We've said it here. To me, that should have been a Nate Schmidt goal last night. But that's a tough thing to reverse too when you've got a lot of in the postseason and all that.
Though you lay it out like that. We just listened to Barry. He was asked the same question. He said, unless you know a lot about goaltending, which most of us don't, it's hard to judge what is or isn't goaltender interference. Well, here's the thing, and this just came to me. In Toronto, working in the war room, working for the National Hockey League, they have people who do know a lot about goaltending. I'm thinking specifically of Kay Whitmore, who was a former NHL goaltender, the guy who's in charge of all the tweaks to the size of equipment, making sure that everybody's pads and sticks, chest protectors and sweaters and pants are all regulation. All that stuff goes through Kay Whitmore in Toronto. Kay Whitmore, get one or two other guys so that Kay Whitmore doesn't have to work every single night. If there's a goaltender interference question, why not have a goaltender who knows about goaltending, as Barry alluded to? Why not have him be the guy who makes the determinations? You've got all these people in Toronto on a given night anyway, looking at every game that's going on, looking at every play that's going on. If the idea is to get it right, why not put the best people in position to absolutely make sure that you get it right?
Yeah, the goalies, Kay Whitmore and others certainly would be good. All right, one more. Matt Poe asking, why does Justin Williams look like Bill Murray? I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if you have an answer for that.
There are a bunch of Murray brothers. You got Brian Doyle Murray from the famous Bubble Boy Seinfeld episode, and Caddyshack as well, and a number of other
Troy
things.
Murray with
so
the
maybe
Blackhawks.
maybe he's just a long lost. So maybe we need a little
Bill
DNA
Murray.
testing.
Bill Murray is a
here.
Cubs fan. Cubs fans won. Just saying, maybe there's something to that. I know that's nothing you don't want to hear.
That's sort of off limits. We'll see. I mean, hey, whatever it takes, right?
Whatever it takes, as long as you end
DNA
up
testing and see if we get a little match there.
get to June, and that would be fantastic. I think that'll do it for us on this edition of the Capitals Report Live on Facebook Live.